Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Collier, your host of Conquer with Chris, the podcast you don't want to miss. I have a very tremendously talented guest today, Patricia Franklin. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Let's get a little bit background from you so the people can kind of know where we're going to go today.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and graduated, went to Penn State, and enjoyed my time there. And then I moved here to the Atlanta area. For several years, I was working in aviation industry, then worked in the classroom as a teacher for 30 years. I retired from my education position in the public schools, but I've gone back to support teachers and support students periodically. But I'm launching a business of my own after dabbling with a little jewelry business on the side. I thought there's something else I'd really like to do with my time. And of course, my mother, you know how mothers can be. They got in your ear. She said, why are you doing this when you have so much training to do that? So at first I thought to myself, well, mom is just being mom. But then it occurred to me, I have a little bit. I need to share something and I need to not waste my time. I still do my jewelry thing on the side, but I'm really pouring into what I think has been a gift for me. And that's launching my NIA Academy for Careers in Literacy. So
Wow.
I'm a reading specialist. I worked at high school for 35 years, and I really enjoy some of the things that I've seen with young people. But there's a lot more that needs to happen. So I'm ready to take on the challenge.
So when you said that, it reminds me of a story in the Bible. I'm not saying you're Caleb. He was 80 years old and he went to Joshua and said, "Give me my mountain." Everyone said, "Oh, this guy's done." He said, "No. I'm ready for my mountain now." You ready for what? So
Mhm.
you've been teaching, you stepped away from teaching, and now you're saying, "Let me get back in and help wherever I can to fill some of the gaps." Well, let's go back in your story a little bit so we can help people know how you got there, because the people knowing how you got to where you are will help them overcome in their life as well. So
Absolutely.
you said you were in aviation. How did you get into aviation?
Oh my gosh, that goes back to 12 years old. And that's the crux of what I do with my business. I believe that people start things in childhood that lead to what they ought to do later on in life, that leads to other things. And if we listen to what our children tell us about themselves, then we're really going to understand how to make our children grow into the citizen that they can be. My mother was on jury duty. Somebody asked her, "Do you know anybody with boys who might want to know about airplanes?" My mother said, "Nope, I don't have any boys." At that time, she didn't have any boys. I take that back. She had a boy. My brother was a baby. He was 2. and and she said, "But I have a daughter. Let me ask her." And my mother asked me, "Do you want to know about airplanes and aviation?" Well, I had a couple of little pain in the butt little sisters who I wanted to get away from every chance I got. So she said, "You want to learn about airplanes? And you can go out here to this location and hang out with the Civil Air Patrol for a little while." I said, "Take me, I'll try it." That day was the start of something big for me. For those who don't know, the Civil Air Patrol is an auxiliary of the United States Air Force that's purpose is to search and rescue and aerospace education for young people. I stayed with the Civil Air Patrol from the time they would let me in. I was 12, they couldn't take me until 13 or something like that. And once I got in, I had the next 4 or 5 years of really learning about aerospace education. I got a chance, as my mother says, to fly before I could ever drive a car. So I was flying an airplane before I could drive a car. So before I even thought about wanting to drive a car, because they drove me, I had transportation. But I got the bug. There's something about getting the bug. When you find something in your young years and it inspires you, it does. I went to college. at and just at the 1972, I wanted to go and become Air Force Air ROTC. And they said, nope, you're a female, you can't fly. You wear glasses, you can't fly. Of course, the next year they let females become pilots. And today, if you recall the Super Bowl, they had a squadron of four ladies who flew the flyover for the Super Bowl, including one who looks like me, but four ladies up there were doing the job. Now, I wish I could have been one of those ladies, but instead I became an aerospace educator. I came out of Penn State with a degree in secondary ed and also speech and communications and a love for aviation. And I put the two together, worked for several years with an organization doing amazingly things with young people out at Fulton County Airport. And to this day, they still exist, which is quite an accomplishment. Julius Alexander and the ACE organization. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they will teach young people to know about aviation. They will take our young babies and teach them how to fly, help them get their solo license at 16 years old. I didn't get mine until I was 20 something or other. However, kids, young adults, anyone who's interested in the aviation industry can get an interest and can get a foot in, can learn about that industry. And in Atlanta, but in the world, that is a high, pardon the pun, that's a high flying career that once a person gets in, they really, really enjoy. Wow. So that was my interest. I worked, I'm the only person I know who left air traffic control and went to the classroom. I know people who left the classroom to go to air traffic control. I left the air traffic control room in Hampton Center as an air traffic assistant after I had gotten married, had two babies, and working round the clock shifts, weekends, holidays were a little bit much for my family. And I decided to go to the classroom. I had my certification. So I went back and became an educator for 35 years. But it's been a very good life.
Well, I want to commend you on so many things, but a personal brag that I like is Big Ten being represented here with Penn State. I'm
Okay.
a go guy.
That's cool.
Guy, but I like Penn State. Yeah, and I appreciate that you trying to push that envelope about getting into the Air Force and being a pilot. That's wonderful. That's a good thing. And then you went and you wanted to be an educator. That's, man, so many good things that you did. And so you see a gap now and you wanted to transition. Let me go back before I get into that. Let me say this, is you took a moment and you said, you know what? Just because they told me no doesn't mean I'm going to get mad and upset and angry. I'm going to go apply myself in a different way.
Oh, no.
And that is a wonderful thing, because nowadays people just get upset if they think, you got a right to do whatever. And then just because you have the right to doesn't mean you need to. Sometimes, a lot of times we have to learn to put limits on ourselves, and not to in a bad way, but sometimes not everything's for you. One of the things we forget is if you do this, sometimes this is not able to be done. Like, for example, you can't be at Disney World and Disneyland at the same time. You got to go to one or the other.
Absolutely.
So sometimes one thing, when there's a limitation, we can excel at something else. And it seems like you've excelled at educating people and educating students. And now you're trying to help them find gaps in the system and repairing those gaps. So kudos to you. But now,
thank you. I have a presentation I do called Deferred But Not Denied.
I love it. A pastor friend of mine says God's delays are not his denials.
That's right. That's right.
Not denials. So you've transitioned to this place where you still help people. And I want to explain how you come into this. How do you, I know your mother shared, hey, you still have so much experience, but how do you connect the pieces and bring it together?
Whew, I got to go back and give it to mother and father. I have parents who knew what to do. They taught me to be the best I could be. So many parents attempt to do that and kids don't listen. I listen. My mother was an educator. My dad was, he worked in a factory in Pennsylvania. But they both taught me, I was raised in the CME church, and they both taught me that you do what you can. And if you can't do it today, you do it tomorrow. I had ministers who poured into me and taught me that there's so much power in each individual. The strength that is within us, is in limitless. And it's just that we have to decide what to do and when to do it. And sometimes it's not today. I have history, Black history, particularly in America, of so many people who are denied one thing, but not deferred to get what they really were qualified to do. And I stand on the shoulders of those who came before me, who taught me that, yes, you can be denied. There are plenty of no's in life. There are plenty of in life. But yes is available for you if you look for it. And the other thing is that but no is just a word. But yes has three more powerful letters. So go for it. If you find that you have an interest, maybe you can't do it one way, but find another way. I wear glasses. I couldn't be an air traffic controller yet. I've been out to the air traffic control training facility from the FAA twice to learn how to become an air traffic controller. The first time I was 16 and made a national civil air patrol competition. There were 50 children out there. I was the only one from Pennsylvania. I learned about air traffic not thinking that I would ever go into it. But later in my life, they had a strike. Some of you may remember in 1980 when they were looking for people who had some aviation experience. I had just finished a contract which was not renewed here in Atlanta for aerospace education. I had the experience. I had an education background. So I went on and applied. They took me. I loved it. Had wonderful experience. Look for experience. The answer to life is experience. So when we find that one thing is not there, that doesn't mean that we can't get experience in something else. Open your eyes and look. You'll find it.
Wow, that's great. That's great. I'm thinking about how people build brands now, because what makes the iPhone different than most phones is they're trying to build an experience, right? What makes Uber different than a taxi cab is the experience. They're trying to build experiences into their product. They're trying to build. So now when people do vacations, they're trying to plan experiences. And really, that's really what it's about, is creating great experiences one behind the other. And
Yes.
so speaking of creating experiences, one of the things I think your parents did a good job of, and I didn't hear you say this, but I hear it in everything you say, is they were problem solvers. They learned how to think and
Yes.
think, and they taught you to think. So if there was a problem, you could figure out another way around it, another way through it. And so thinking like that is rare. Like it's not even common sense. It's just thinking for yourself and not letting being spoon fed by other people and being raffled off to the social whims of everybody. I think that's important that people know that thinking for yourself is important. Don't just take what you're fed by any media for granted. Do your research, figure out what the true source is, figure out X, Y, and Z. So you're launching your program, your academy. I want you to tell the folks about that. This is exciting.
I'm going to fall back just a step two and talk about not only thinking, but reading. I was a reader from early on. My librarians knew me at 8 years old because I would come in and find a book and read a book. And that's all. I've always enjoyed finding different sources of reading. My dad used to have to hunt down his Reader's Digest because I got it when it came home in the mail, and he'd have to wait for me to realize that it hadn't come in, and that I had it, and I was reading. But in Reader's Digest, there were experiences. You're reading about all kinds of crazy things. And I encourage people to encourage themselves and their children to read. It doesn't matter what, it matters that you do. And that is where I start with the NIA Academy. And the word NIA is the Kiswahili word for purpose. It is a word that encourages people to find out what your purpose is. And in the NIA Academy, my goal is to help young people take a deep dive into understanding their own purpose. I have a tool that I use, a psychological tool that helps them figure out how their mind works, what they like, what their personality lends themselves to. And you'll find that even if you can't do one thing, your personality will lend itself to another. My vision didn't lend me to see, but it lent me to working in aviation in spite of a few no's that I had. Um, I understand that our young people today don't get those kinds of experiences in the classroom because there's so many things that testing and bureaucracy has required that we do for our children. Yes, there's a lot to do, but there's so much more because our world is so much more diverse now. We have to take our young people. We used to do this and have apprenticeships. We used to do this, mentor them. We used to have opportunities for vocational exploration that were far more than we can do now. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Back in the 1980s, there was a program called Tech Prep nationwide. It was focused on helping young people learn that if you're in classes, there are ways of thinking that help lead toward your career. Many young students took high school classes and college courses simultaneously, and they were able to graduate with high school with an associate's degree. What that meant having credit, having accomplished high school and college first 2 years in 1 year. That fell by the wayside because it was not able to be personalized. Well, what do reading specialists do? We personalize the instruction that we give. And that was the crux that brought me in. I really played a lot of times. I went to a lot of conferences and learned to be the tech prep coordinator in my school in the 90s. After tech prep fell through, I'm realizing now that now is more importantly the time because so much is changing and people don't understand how to change, how to pivot on a dime. Well, some people can't pivot on a quarter, and some of us need to pivot on a dollar. But we all have to understand how to pivot. My course, the NIA Academy, has a signature program called PMAC that focuses on personality, apprenticeship, mentorship, and other opportunities for a career dive to help you understand how to look where you think, how to plan your path. And when my students leave me, and this is something I did with many of my high school students, they leave me with a plan for moving forward into a career or into and through several experiences. So that's something that I did from my parents through to my children. And I believe that we have a need for that in our society today. So that's where the NIA Academy starts.
Wow. Wow. So many things I'd like to unpack there, but the first one is just the name, Nia. Purpose. I believe
Yes.
that's one of the things the kids are missing. Is like, I think also is they don't feel like there's a purpose to life. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend, he says, do everything with purpose, on purpose, and
Mm-hmm.
live an intentional life. You live it differently than everybody else because people just going from thing to thing, right? This week I'm doing this, next week I'm doing something different because you don't have any intention. There's no plot or plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're just living. So I think that's important that people get purpose and they understand how they were made to be. Like you said, their personality, where their character, where their traits uh, limit them, whether physical, mental ability, their personality can help them find a different way to
Mm-hmm.
get something done. I think that's important because that helps. people find out how to move in purpose. And one of the things I found in young people and young down to small kids is that they don't really feel or understand their purpose for being here. And I think it's important that we address that. And we give them clear direction. And I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad that you've been given the gifts, the talents, the training to help them, to use an aviation term, fly, fly where they need to fly. And that's awesome. So how can people find you?
I'm already on Facebook. I do have a NIA Academy page on Facebook. You can Google me to get more information because the NIA Academy for Careers and Literacy is on Google, and that will give you contact information for me.
Great. Is there any last words you'd like to leave with the people before we get off today?
I just want to remind people that purpose sounds intimidating, but sometimes you just have to be reflective. It's not always having a purpose ahead of you. Sometimes it's looking back at what has happened in your past to figure out how it worked for you or how it didn't work. Everything has a positive and a negative. Sometimes the negative is meant to teach a lesson. If we learn our lessons and take them to move forward, then move forward confidently, having learned that lesson. Purpose can be wonderful. It doesn't mean everything has to be on this narrow track, but understand how the whole world works together. We are just a single portion of a world, but without us, the world would be nothing. So we can and should help ourselves, our families, our friends, our community to be a better place. When we do that, it will be.
Wow. 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 Listen, it's been all my pleasure, Patricia. Thank you so much. My name is Chris Collier, and this has been another episode of Conquer with Chris.